The trade review is a little bit later today, but still knocking it out regardless. So I'm going to quickly go over this morning's trades. Honestly, there wasn't a lot to this morning. I was forced to miss out on a lot of most of the potential trade opportunities because they didn't align with the parameters of my strategy, and my triggers were invalidated. But here's right before market open. And as you can see, we are at all-time highs for both ES and NQ. There's nothing above us, nothing, and a lot under us, but nothing above us. And the market's very bullish. We've been running all night, and which got us to all-time highs, which I didn't really expect because, we had a long ways to all-time highs still, like, a couple of days worth usually. So you got to whip out the handy fib extensions, and you can do that like so. So I brought up my fib extensions. You got to use fib extensions to find PTs on areas of the chart where price action has never been. Yeah, I don't know how to use fib extensions. Look it up. But if you don't, you need to know how, especially in this market. But the bright side is you're not in this type of market too often, maybe a third of the year. So not the most necessary thing, but it's very useful. But anyways, so our only pivot to the upside is ES pre-market high. Now I'm hoping that the market opens bearish. So we pull back at market open. And then if we invalidate a majority of the pullback, I can be triggered in for calls to this pivot. It's a great trade. It's the only trade that I have. So we get ready for market open. This is one candle before market open, and we are dipping. Now it's technically dipped far enough for a call entry to be viable because the risk reward isn't horrendous, but it's not the best. Anyways, ES ends up being stronger than NQ. NQ was stronger briefly. And I did fill SPX calls half size here. Now I did end up adding a tiny bit more right after I filled, and I'll talk about why in a second. But I had to go half size. Why? Well, this is a fine trade. I'm technically able to be triggered in. There's nothing wrong with this trade, but A, entering during the first candle market open is always riskier. B, look how close I am to my PT. More specifically, and more importantly, look how close I am to my stop loss. I am one candle away from stopping out. I pretty much never take trades where I can stop out in just one or two candles. That is not enough time for my hypothesis to have a solid chance of coming to fruition. And that's just kind of a tip for you guys. If your stop loss is ever one or two candles away, you're probably going to get swept and it's probably going to go back up. So I entered half size, but if the selling wick invalidates on ES, I will add the rest of my position. Well, the next candle opened kind of bullish, or it opened fairly bullish. Or, sorry, ES's candle didn't open bullish, but it was extremely bullish because it was so much stronger than NQ. Compare these two candles here. Not only did NQ sweep this low here, which it's kind of hard to see because there is a buy, this buying wick is thin, but not only did NQ sweep some lows, ES is super, super, super strong. This is beautiful. So I added just a little bit, just a tiny bit though, like one contract, because the selling wick didn't invalidate. But I added the rest on this candle. Now I was waiting for ES to make a lower low to add, and, well, I added. And I filled my ad roughly like right here when it got this low. Of course, because the candle was dropping, it came to here, which brought me to a normal size position. But now my stop loss was like here, and it's looking like it's going to invalidate. Now, obviously, if this candle just opened like this, I would have stopped out. You can see that this candle, it's not a bullish candle. It's quite the opposite. However, during a majority of the candle, there was a decent buying wick there, right? During a majority of the candle, we did come down, we formed a buying wick, and we were sitting roughly right here, which is pretty much where I added. But with the way it closed, it was pretty much a guaranteed stop loss, and that's what I did on the next candle, I believe. I just stopped out of the trade. Pretty early into that candle as well. Very early into that candle. So not a huge loss because I entered with half size, but that was just, invalidated. So start off the day minus 27, 26%. I think it was like minus 27. One full size minus 27% trade to start the day, and things are looking pretty bearish. You know, NQ's got this nice pivot. I'm going to highlight all of them, but you can see they kind of cluster right here. So I would like this demand to break. I'm bearish for that demand to break. I could argue an entry here, but I just stopped out of my call trade. And you guys know me, I don't reverse my trades. I don't stop out and then re-enter or take profits and re-enter right away. It's a great way to deteriorate your psychology, and every time you guys do that, how does it end up? It would be no different for me, right? You would end up in catastrophe. So I had to wait, and here we started to bounce. Now, I am bearish on the market. We haven't validated a majority of this bounce. I'm technically bearish for ES to break this demand, and I'm pretty bearish for NQ to get to these yellow lines, but we have a problem. I don't enter continuation trades on pivots. That's number one. Here's the problem. This is a pivot right here. We perfectly swept, putting in a reversal candle. We didn't get a massive volume spike or anything, but that is a solid buying wick. NQ as well. Perfectly swept the pivot, putting in a reversal candle and getting a very big volume spike for the size of the candle. I mean, look at the size of this candle. This candle had much less volume than this one. On top of that, we're in heavy demand. We have 2 demand zones on NQ and 1 on ES. I cannot enter puts here. If ES bounced just a little bit higher to 1 tick higher to where if it was a perfect double bottom, I would have been able to enter. But I can't. The only trades I can enter is if we come back up, I can enter calls. Or if we bounce, invalidate, and put in a proper bear flag, I will look past the pivot, and it's enough to override that and trigger me into puts. But I told you guys in my channel, I'm bearish. It's just, it's pretty rare that I'm very bearish. I'm not able to get into a trade, and this is one of those rare. I mean, this is the first time this has happened in weeks, honestly. 3 weeks plus. I don't even remember the last time. We start bouncing. NQ is bouncing pretty hard. I'm actually preparing to enter QQQ calls up here. But if ES invalidates this drop, I still can't enter, man. We're on a pivot. We're sweeping lower lows. Even though I'm kind of bearish, I can't do it. So I tell you guys that, and I say, if you want to enter puts, be my guest. I can't, though. And I have to sit out and be disciplined because I have a specific way of trading. I have a specific strategy that grants me success and income over a large over a large sample of trades. And, that requires me to sit out of trades I'm not properly triggered into. And because of the reversal candle, the pivot sweeping, and demand, I can't enter puts, even though I'm leaning bearish. So demand broke just as predicted. NQ swept these pivots, and now it's looking great for a bounce. Look at that volume spike. That is reversal volume. Look at the buying wick. That's a reversal buying wick. Look at the pivots that it's sweeping. Beautiful. And demand still on NQ. Now, ES's next pivot isn't until all the way down here at the bottom of this demand. So I told you guys, the only way I can enter demand is if we fall to here and then consolidate. Then I can enter puts for this pivot. But I need it to fall to here so it can get away from this pivot, and NQ can get away and under these pivots where I'm not at a substantial risk of getting swept. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen, and we bounce. We come all the way back down. I was fairly close to entering calls. I forgot this part. Perfectly swept. We're coming up with momentum. Looks good. I'm technically able to get in calls here, but I wisely decided to wait to see how it's going to test this minor pivot here on NQ. Also, another thing that bugged me is ES, I couldn't tell if ES really wanted to go up. On this candle, it looked fine. The previous candle's not really. But if we take a fib from this high to low on NQ, you're going to see that right at this pivot as well. It's the 61.8 fib, which is the biggest, strongest, most important fib that causes the biggest reversals most often, right? It's just it's the golden fib, right? It's a golden pocket. I want to see it break over the 61.8 before I enter. So this was the trade setup, and I called it out roughly here, and it'll be taken to new high of day, or even this pivot here. Or, I mean, that's not pivot, fib extension level. So that's what I was looking for. Also, I was unwilling to enter early because of the potential inverse head and shoulders. NQ looks great to put in an inverse head and shoulders here. And that allows me to predict a pullback. Now, if NQ puts in an inverse head and shoulders and perfectly comes back up to here, I can take an early entry here. It will look good enough, right? If we have a flawless pattern like that, I can warrant an early entry and assume or hypothesize that it's likely to at least get to my entry area as a result of the inverse head and shoulders. However, at the moment, ES is kind of looking like a bear flag. And again, I can't enter ES. I cannot enter SPX puts because we're still on the pivot. And NQ kind of looks bullish. I can't do it. Well, now I really can't enter because now we just made a lower low on ES with a buying wick. And increasing volume. NQ could bounce out of demand. I don't know if it's going to, though. But this is the trade setup that I'm waiting on. Okay, maybe we're going to get an inverse head and shoulders. Yeah, maybe. Nope, kind of looking like a bear pennant, right? And this is what I called out. Starting to look like a bear pennant, not inverse head and shoulders, so it can break to the downside again. And unfortunately, I would not be able to trade it because ES is chopping down and making lower lows. I cannot go short if ES is chopping down and rebounding from lower lows, especially when pivots are being swept and NQs in demand. I cannot do it. I could only take calls, which means it's easy to get faked into calls a million times, but I'm doing a good job of avoiding that. But I for sure cannot be in puts. NQ made a lower low, forming falling wedge here. Didn't really matter though, broke to the downside. Here's NQ sweeping another lower low with a buying wick and a huge volume spike. And we just had a bunch of supply form, I guess. Very bullish reversal indication here. And we do reverse. ES gets exactly to where I said it was going to go. It's really unfortunate that today's just one of those rare days where I just can't trade it. And that's just the way it is. Sometimes rules are there for a reason. And in order to be a profitable trader, you have to limit your potential, which means take a limited amount of trades, trade for a limited time, and have a defined mechanical set of parameters that can allow you to know exactly when you're allowed to and not allowed to take a trade. And if you stick to those, your psychology is not going to deteriorate nearly as fast, and it's going to elongate your success, right? But if you don't limit your potential as a trader, which means you don't stop trading when you're red, you take every single setup, you enter a trade every single time you're confident in price action doing something, right? Every time you think that you're confident that price action is about to go up or go down, if you take a trade every single time that happens, you're going to lose money as a trader. That's not what trading's about, right? The way I trade, it doesn't really matter what I think. I either have to get in or I can't. That's it. I have to get in or I have to stay out. I'm either triggered into a trade or I'm not. And that's how you guys are supposed to trade. It has nothing to do with what you think unless you're trading in a very subjective mode. But even your most discretionary modes of trading become mechanical with the correct amount of documentation and backtesting supporting that strategy, which turns it mechanical as you slap on parameters. Anyways, so beautiful. We swept this pivot on ES. We swept demand. NQs making lower lows. And it did not make a perfect double bottom. I can now enter this trade early. And this is what I said. As NQ was dropping, I said, well, now I can enter NQ here. Reason being, we're sweeping lower lows. We have a new defined range. Looks great. All of the above. And this is a nice fib extension level, which appears to be nice in the past. Maybe it'll continue being nice. Right? We have rejections here. It's how you test the confluence of your fibs. We have rejections here. Not really a rejection there. Some bounces here. It looks like price action is showing a decent amount of confluence to this fib extension. So I'm going to believe it's going to continue doing that. So my PT is going to be the fib extension. But you could enter early here. It's fine. You get the volume spike. You get a buying wick. You're making lower lows in demand, sweeping pivots on both sides. NQ stronger. You could totally enter a reversal trade here, but I wanted to wait one more candle just to be sure, because it was me erring on the side of caution earlier that prevented me from getting in this call trade and giving me my second loss of the day. Because keep in mind, I took one loss right at market open, and I have been sitting, doing what I'm good at, which is nothing, for half an hour. I have been sitting and patiently waiting for half an hour to take a trade. And during that half hour, I was accurately predicting where price action would go, which is a frustrating circumstance to be in. I need one more small green candle, and then I'll officially invalidate most of this little drop here. See how it's like slightly under the 50%? Boom. I enter on this candle. Pretty much full size. I plan on averaging up, though. I want to save a little bit to average down in case like this does put in some kind of crazy inverse head and shoulders or pulls back to demand. But I said I'll average up right around 23,172, and I end up doing that. But no, this went right to PT. I sold here. Most of it. Kept a runner position. Runner position got to 45%, 44%. I personally made 28% on the trade, though. Keep it, and I sold the last bit here for a decent profit. For some reason, the calls weren't chopping at all. Like, they weren't chopping during that drop, so that was pretty cool. I finished today barely green. I lost 26% on this trade, made 28, 29% on this trade, barely green. And plus, I gave back a tiny bit of profits on the runner position. I was a little bit heavier than full size because of the average up. Now, I didn't enter full size initially, but when I averaged up, I was a little bit heavier because the contracts went up. But not enough for me to drop the amount of contracts I'm adding to my average up, right? So, yeah, very small green day today, and I called it today. That was it for me. We've traded for an hour, extremely disciplined, sat on our hands when I needed to, and I ended up getting rewarded for it. I didn't end up losing money today. Now, most other analysts care about their win rate a ton, and they either won't stop out nearly as quickly as I do, or they will try to chase their money back to protect their such precious win rate and all those things. But realistically, if you do this for a living, you shouldn't give a shit about your win rate. You should just care about doing what's correct. And the only time you ever care about your win rate is over the last 20, 30 trades I look at, which is a sample size. Say, what's my overall win rate? Right. Above 60%, great. Above 70%, great. Ooh, it started to fall into the really low 60s or high 50s. Let's see what happened. Was it my trading? Was I just unlucky with the market? Was the market just going against me? What's happening there? And then you can evolve as a trainer and be honest with yourself. But far too many people force a good win rate when their strategy doesn't actually have that good of a win rate. And you will be in a constant state of temptation to break your rules, to try to force the expectations you want or force the results you expect, which would be a certain win rate. All those things will just destroy your psychology over time. So you have to be honest with yourself and you have to document. And then over the course of 20 to 30 trades, look back and see what needs to be improved upon TA-wise and psych-wise. If you do that, you will continue leveling up as a trader. Now, I can send out a couple of TA alerts. This started falling back. Right here, I sent this TA alert. I said, if we invalidate this pullback, NQ will look great for new high of day. It'll be confirmed bull flag, all those things. However, it will look a lot better if ES sweeps low of day, because then it would have scooped that pivot. And if we miss low of day, well, it will hurt the odds of this bull flag playing out. Well, we came up, but we missed the entry, which is great. Keep in mind, I'm not trading. This is just a TA alert. But it missed the entry, which is fantastic. That is fantastic entry criteria. You missed out on a potential red trade, and ES got to exactly where we said it would go. Also, right before this, it was also a great trade right here because ES was, as you can see, an inverse head and shoulders. There you go. Which looks great. However, though, a lot of times inverse head and shoulders return into bear pennants. And how do you know if it's turning into a bear pennant and a little bit more likely to break to the downside than it was? If you get another oscillation during this right shoulder, and that's what happened. And that's why I called out to you guys in my channel. What did I say exactly in my channel? I said, ES is turning into a bear pennant. I'm expecting a pullback, so on and so forth. So it was inverse head and shoulders, looked bullish, but then I called out the bear pennant. Now it's kind of 50-50, maybe slightly leaning more towards the bear pennant break to the downside. May not invalidate the flag because, I mean, a break to the downside could catalyze NQ to create the next oscillation of the flag. But we did end up breaking to the downside, which is great because you missed out on that trade. However, ES did end up sweeping, and we did not come back up. Bear bull flag invalidated. You should never have a bull flag invalidate 50% of the run, and by the time that happened, it's done. Right? If a bull flag invalidates even 50% of your run, massive red flags, it'll rarely play out. And right here, I set one more TA setup, and I said, you know, NQ, you know, it wasn't flawless. It went a little bit above it. It was more of a sweep than a rejection. But NQ showed confluence and beautifully swept my 23.6 fib extension level. I'm personally expecting it to get to my 0% fib extension level and possibly sweep it. Look what happened. And that's in my channel. You guys can go look at that. It perfectly swept it. Came right back up. It was beautiful. And it looks like we've been maybe going up. That's a head and shoulders. That played out beautifully. Beautiful head and shoulders play out. Yeah, so the fib extensions, first day using them in a while, worked great. You know, it gave me a flawless PT or flawless PT. And it gave you guys another TA alert, which I gave you, or which I alerted to you guys here, presenting a great short opportunity. So, but yeah, that is today's trade review. I didn't do anything else after that, and I'm done looking at the markets. Does anyone have any questions for me whatsoever? By the way, this demand is a fairly weak demand. I believe it's 2 demand zones. It's kind of bright. But this is a 45-minute demand. It's already caused 2 bounces, and it's been very tested here. The more times you test support, the more likely it is to break. So I am expecting this demand to break today. It would be an anomaly if it didn't. But anyone else have any questions whatsoever regarding anything I just talked about? No, everyone's good? All right, sweet. Well, this was a very much more TA intensive and more advanced trade review, but I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will let you guys know when it's posted to the YouTube. And if I don't see you again today, have a great rest of your day, and we will be back tomorrow for hopefully a much more green day than today was. But all right, I'll see you guys later.